What's up? What's up? What's up? Late night edition. You're hearing another episode of House of I-10. I know it's been a minute, man, but we back into it. It's been a lot going on in the nation, been a lot going on around the state of Florida. And, HB 999 has been an important topic of conversation. You got a principal who was forced to resign because they chose to highlight art to some students, and one of the chair members was upset about that, and even went so far as to label it pornographic. If you know, I wonder what I'm talking about, the statue of David. The mayor from Florence, Italy, has even invited the principal over because of how preposterous the claims are. Man, so it's a lot that's going on right now. DeSantis, our governor down here, is on a rampage. As you know, he's trying to go out, most likely to declare his race for president of these United States. But with everything that's going on, man, I got my own things that's on my mind right now. Also, we're gonna get into everybody's talking about the 1619 project in CRT. So, we may deal a little bit to find out what's so bad about the 1619 project and where are the lies at. I got the book, so let's explore it. Let's talk about it. But as always, first and foremost, I want to say thank you for tuning into the video. Thank you for sharing your time, your space with me. As you know, this channel focuses on African American history as well as leadership, and I try to blend the two when I have these conversations because I think that both are essential, and I want to make sure that I'm giving the audience something that they can take away as you spend time with me. So as always, I got to set my watch to make sure that I don't go too long. So we can go ahead and do that. Try to put myself on a timer so I can be conscious of your time. But if we need to, we can always go into a part two. So first, what I'm going to start out with, just I'm just kind of thinking about our society today. I'm thinking about our school system. I'm thinking about how do we move up, how do we get closer. And let me say this: everything that I do, I am always trying to figure out how to bring people closer together, how we can really live in democracy that works for all of us. But we got to face some hard truths. So that's always my goal, not trying to divide and separate people. If you want to rock with me, rock with me. If you don't, then don't. Hey, I'm not going to force you to do anything. But you're going to have to be able to digest some truths because that's the only way we can come to a level of understanding is we got to go through some of the pain, some of the torment. That way we can come out on the other side of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding in an effort to achieve freedom, justice, and equality for all. So just starting off from there, I was just having a conversation, with a couple people. And I think one of the things that I do want to start off with is this whole notion of, did integration put us in a worse state as a community, or were we better off with segregation? And that's a topic that we all can go back and forth on. There's so many different philosophies and outlooks on it, and I just like to explore both sides of it. I like to have a full conversation about it and just see really, what are the outcomes. And so this kind of stems from a conversation that Harry Belafonte and Martin Luther King was having way back then. I think it was around 1967. And Martin Luther King realized through the middle of the civil rights struggle that the struggle for integration would ultimately become a struggle for economic rights. And so we had these achievements where, we got the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you got Brown versus Board of 1954, 10 years before that. You have the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We're able to now go to different lunch counters and eat. So, this achievement is happening on a social scale, but what's happening as far as the economics go? And I think that there was something a little bit more underlying that was sinister and more underlying at play. And that was, I think that the powers that be, those white folks in those communities who didn't want Black people or other minorities to be able to come into their businesses and shop at their businesses, they all of a sudden said, hey, money, that dollar bill is green. All money is green money. So why don't we allow them to come if they want to eat, they want to have our burgers, they want to drink our milk, they want to drink our juice, they want to sit at our corners? Why shouldn't we allow them to? That way, won't we be doubling what comes in? Because we're already getting money from our community, but then we can get money from the Black community too. So since they want to shop with us so bad, let's allow them to. And what happens in the end? Well, one community gets richer, the other community gets poor because they start taking their resources from out of their community. They stop shopping at their particular stores. They stop shopping at their restaurants. They stop supporting their TV repair individuals. They stop worrying about the manufacturing and distribution for everyday essentials that they may need. So, supporting other Black companies. And then we begin to go, especially if you have a psychological breakdown, you begin to go and now you want to affiliate and be a part of what you think and value as the better products. Although we don't really know scientifically or can't really say if these products were indeed better than others, but you always want a little bit of what you don't have. That's just like people who are suffering from poverty, right? They want a little bit more money, and sometimes they want to get a whole lot of money because it's that scarcity mentality. So they want to get what it is they don't have, which is understandable because when you're in poverty, there's so many layers. They say money can't buy happiness. It may not be able to buy happiness, but it can damn sure buy you a better satisfaction with the situation that you may find yourself in. Once you get access to a couple more dollars, you get access to a larger credit line, you get about a debt, you get a lot of relief of that burden of poverty off your shoulders. So I always say to a certain extent, and what the research kind of says is that once you get over that 75,000 threshold, then everything from there is just added on. But you should be able to accommodate all of your necessities on a $75,000 income. Now, once you have a bunch of kids, that goes into it. If you sending money back home, that goes into it, plays different factors. But we just talking about the average individual. So, Martin Luther King had realized that about this whole making a pivot towards economics, because he said that's one of the things that we really didn't touch on. And so he says we fought hard and long for integration, as I believe we should have. And I know we will win, but I have come to believe that we are integrating into a burning house. I'm afraid that America has lost the moral vision she may have had. And I'm afraid that even as we integrate, we are walking into a place that does not understand that this nation needs to be deeply concerned with the plight of the poor and disenfranchised. Until we commit ourselves to ensuring that the underclass is given justice and opportunity, we will continue to perpetuate the anger and violence that tears the soul of this nation. I fear I am integrating my people into a burning house. So we look around now at the economic conditions of our people, and all across the board in different communities across this nation, we have, the Black community suffering from poverty, but then we also have other communities too that feel, some rates of poverty as well. But if we just focus, on the African American community, the businesses aren't there anymore. Dr. Claude Anderson states in his book Powernomics, which is a phenomenal book. If you have not read that book, read that book if you want to learn a little bit more about our economic conditions. But he says that he argues we don't actually live in neighborhood. We don't actually live in communities. We live in neighborhoods. So all we do is go home and we rest our heads. Sure, we may walk up and down the street, affiliate with our neighbors, but we don't have the major essential businesses and support systems that we need, such as the school system. And we're talking about school systems that are run and operated by our community, banks, the banks that are ran and operated by our people, and owned by our people, healthcare facilities, that are owned by our people, high qualified doctors, a plethora of doctors, not a scarcity of doctors. So we're missing some of these essentials and we're missing the ability to govern and run these essential services. And so with the education, we're not able to really control our curriculum. So the kids are having to exist in a curriculum that doesn't necessarily meet the space and doesn't meet the place where they are for what they need to excel and thrive in the community. And so, we're looking right now, African American history. There's a large chance that African American studies will be whitewashed, will be tapered down, to fit a particular theme that everybody can digest, that doesn't bring heartache, that doesn't bring feelings of pain or guilt for some of the past crimes that have been done, which is interesting because we don't want to explore the history, but then there are some people that are still benefiting off of the conditions and things that happened way back when. And another thing that we need to understand is that if we don't focus and really have authentic conversations about the history, then a lot of us keep on going through. We make the same mistakes for one, but then we have these misrepresentations and misunderstandings and mischaracterizations on our history. So whereas we may believe the Underground Railroad only went north, we may not know about the story of Fort Mose or the Underground Railroad going into Mexico, or going Fort Mose is out there by St. Augustine, Florida. We may think that there were always more free African Americans in the North, not understanding that according to Henry Louis Gates in his book, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negroes, there was actually, I think it was around either 23 or 32, I get the number mixed up. There are 23 or 32,000 more free Black people in the South. Or even when we talk about race, because I used the word Black, that race came out of, and I have this in one of my other videos, definitely go check out Debunking the Myths of Racist Ideology. That's what it is. Go check that out because I explore the origins of race, but how that was built off of pseudoscience. These people, there was scientific racism, which is not a real thing. So, but we have then adopted these ideologies, and then we have other people who choose to live a life of racism, who are living off these ideologies that are based off of pseudoscience, no factual basis behind it at all. So it's these essential components that need to be attacked and need to be dealt with in the community so that we can have more healthier societies that thrive and that are essential for our young people, so then they can have better outcomes as they matriculate throughout school and as they go through the different stages of life into adulthood. And so, you get to the banks. I was having a conversation and I never realized this, but somebody pointed this out to me and said that we actually fund our own gentrification. And I said, well, I don't understand. How do we do that? Well, the fact that the banks exist in our community are some of the, most popular banks, but they're owned by people outside of our community. The CEOs are not Black people. The majority of the staff are not Black people. So what happens is we take our money from either from work or however we get paid, we put it in the bank. But in the bank, that money just doesn't sit into your account. That money is always moving and is mainly delved out into loans that have interest rates on them. And so those loans go to those developers who come into that bank, or those business owners who come into that bank and they open up a business in that particular neighborhood. I'll tell you some places that's really seeing this right now is places like Liberty City, different places in Atlanta. Liberty City, I'm talking about Miami for those who may not be down here in Florida. But yeah, Atlanta, or you just see this gentrification happening in these different communities that used to be like all Black, but now other people are coming in and these developers are loving this land in this area because the land is cheap. And we, not knowing or not having our own banks, we're actually funding because the banks can't give out the money if they don't have the money. And a lot of that times, especially when they are operating in our community, they're getting our money. It's not rich people from the suburbs riding into the ghettos or the particular areas what they call urban areas. If you're from Detroit, 7 Mile and Greenfield, who are putting their money in those banks. Those are our neighborhood folks who are putting their money in those bank accounts. So then, we move on from the banks. We talk about the stores, having fresh produce, fresh foods, getting with our farmers, our people out in the rural areas. they don't have the land, so it's all of these different moving components that impact and affect the community. And I don't think, I hate when people say, oh, well, now are you promoting segregation? No. What we're saying is that the communities in which we already live need to be upgraded. And just like other people's communities, other minority groups' communities, we need to have the same benefit to have the same thriving businesses, and not just dry cleaners, barbershops, but I'm talking about those essential businesses. We need our own pharmacies as well, in our community. And that's something that I don't think is the government's responsibility, right? That is a plan that we need to come on accord with, and we need to adopt and figure out how we can pull our dollars, pull our resources together, work with the kids from the next generation to create, reinstitute family businesses again, buying up homes. You got companies like Zillow that's buying up all of these. I remember my parents, they used to call them starter homes, right? That's for for a family or a young single adult who's about to buy their first home. It's something small, it's not quite everything that you want, but it's your starter home. You get to build on top of that. And you can't get those now or can't find them, or they're super overpriced because now they're creating a system where they want you to be renters. And so, as far as my understanding, one of your greatest pathways to wealth is through home acquisition, home ownership. And so now you can't do that because these huge companies, and I understand it's capitalism, right? Capitalism, baby. It's the system that we in. You got to learn how to play the game. But our school systems don't set us up to learn how to play the game. They set us up to be laborers, to work for an employer who is pretty much having CEOs on top who are just trying to get rich and trying to build bigger businesses. But it's not teaching us necessarily how to become producers, how to become our own CEOs of big businesses that thrive and that operate in these communities. So whether you have your Baltimores, you have your Chicago's, like when you talk about solving the poverty issue, which then contributes, to the violence that occurs, which contributes to the lack of uh, transportation, which contributes to the lack of healthy foods. Like all of these are domino effects. So if you're not going to get serious about identifying what really needs to be there, how we get those dollars to bring that there, changing behavior so that we start to value, and that's internal work, that's inside work. So we need our psychologists, we need our mental health counselors, we need them to come in the community and work with us so we can identify the needs and we can incorporate these solutions in our community. I think you don't need another expert to identify what the problems are. We talk about problems ad nauseum. Everybody is an expert on identifying problems, but we are not getting to solutions. And so I want to be a part of those groups because I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to sit up here and act like I have all the answers, but I'm reading some books and I'm getting some insights that say, well, here's pieces to the puzzle. And I think if you have more people at the table who are trying to build on these essential components for a thriving community, more people sitting at the table, right? And you just can't come and just offer your opinion, right? We need your opinion to be based out of some research. We need you to expend some of that brain power and digging through some books, reworking, rewiring what your level of understanding is to the problems that exist, shedding some of those biases that you may harbor and possess. We need you to come to the table and offer solutions that are rooted in your research, but then that are also maybe rooted in your expertise and your experience. And so I think that there's this opportunity for everybody, right? We got to have an abundance mindset. If you don't want to be poor, what should you not be doing? Walking around talking about, I don't want to be poor. You walk around and talk about how you want to generate wealth. That's the way of getting up out of poverty, or at least, starting that, the understanding the power of the tongue, and then how the tongue is able to, how your thoughts are able to be manifested into words, and your words are manifested into the realities that are right before your eyes. Those processes are essential to us helping push ourselves, I'd say grab us up by our bootstraps, which that's the facade. How you gonna tell some people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, but you were given all types of affirmative action opportunities. You were given things like, oh, GI bills, if you were a veteran. We talking about World War I, World War II specifically. If you were a veteran, you can come back and you can access things, or you were given money, FHA loans, and non-discriminatory, non-redlining, not being pushed out into particular areas, and then having projects and ghettos created to foster perpetual cycles of poverty that then helps to funnel and foster a thriving prison system or criminal justice system that takes from the people who are already impoverished, and you constantly keep pulling their resources from them. You can't sit up here be in those positions to get all of those accommodations and then try to tell the other people who've been suffering in this nation for a very long time to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Stop asking for handouts when you got a handout yourself. We can crack open the pages and look into history and see that. We can see that more white women benefited off of welfare than minority women. Or you got a large helping of the share, which no knock, right? It's access is affordable. You take advantage of whatever is there, but data and outcomes are data and outcomes. And so, but in this space, what I want to definitely focus on is those essential tools and components to let's do the very thing that they're telling us to do. Let's create a plan. Let's help out our own community and pull ourselves up. Let's do that. So Malcolm X had a quote, and he says that a race of people are like an individual until he utilizes his own talent, take pride in his own history, expresses its own culture, and affirms its own selfhood. It will never be fulfilled unto itself. And so, as we study and as we learn this history, and as we take a walk through those pages and we learn these blueprints, right? We learn these solutions that were laid out by our historical figures before. I think that is how we responsibly create pathways to our liberation. I always like to place the emphasis on the importance of learning the history, right? Because it's not divorced from the present. And too many times we look at history as past events, but we never try to relate them and tie them and fit them into our current events. So we miss the gift that exists when you crack open the pages of these books from these great philosophers and historians from whatever your background is. That's why culture matters, because culture is passed down, but it has to start in history first. So that's why those historical figures are so important, because they were already expending their time, energy, and talent into figuring out how to get us up out of these conditions. So what sense does it make, right? Because I want to cut down the time that you have to spend on doing some of these things. I want to cut that time in half. So what sense does it make for us to, hey, we identify that there is a criminal justice problem, criminal justice system problem. No, let's go economics. There's an economics problem, but we're not going to read Dr. Claude Anderson. We're not going to read Thomas Sowell. We're not going to read we're not going to read what Martin Luther King was saying. We're not going to start to touch on how they were trying to incorporate poverty into the racism and social stratifications that we experience. That to me, that doesn't make sense. So now you're gonna bump your head up, you're gonna bump your head up against the wall, you're gonna run into the same obstacles, you're gonna have the same hangups, you're gonna trip and fall over the same roadblocks that have already been laid out, even though in those books and in the history, they've laid out the answers for you and told you how to even recognize it coming from a mile away. That's not how I want to expend my time. That's not really what I want to do. Hold on. Now, let me just switch gears real quick and let me talk to my negative Nancy's out there who just I think you had hope at one point. You just really gave up on hope because you've constantly been running into, people who either let you down. You can't find the right group to kind of come with and work together. You don't see how we're gonna make it out of this position. You kind of accepted the conditions that you were in. Listen, there has to be a sense of unselfishness that comes with this work, right? And you're not alone because hey, I'm here, right? And there's others of us that are here and we're trying to figure this out. And we can't do this without you. But what we have to understand is that this is not an individual sport. That's just like the people who don't vote, right? Voting doesn't do anything. My vote's not going to count. What does my vote matter? Or why should I be out there? Because them people don't care about me. And all of that is valid if you're thinking about yourself at this. You're never going to win as an individual. You have to come through with community. I think that's one of the things that we fail to understand and realize when it comes to some of these essentials, especially when you plan in the realm of politics and economics, that it's always going to be about interdependence, not independence. The best thing you can do is hold yourself accountable and do your part, but it cannot be divorced from your neighbors or the people who you work with, other colleagues. And sure, understand everybody is not going to be on the same train as you. Everybody's not going to want to march to the beat of that drum. However, you have to find the individuals that are trying to walk with you. You have to find the individuals who are not trying to sit by idly and see the conditions around them, but not feel like they have some sense of obligation to contribute to improve the conditions in which we find ourselves in. So what makes politicians listen, what makes companies listen, which we should have recognized in things like the bus boycott, which we should have recognized in the March on Washington. Mind you, not the only one in 1963, but A. Philip Randolph was finna do one, I think it was 1941. And that was called the March on Jobs. So you know, as we critique and we move away from just only trying to get jobs, but trying to become producers instead of just major consumers, you also have to think that we need to build somebody up in our community to help them mold them to become the politician that we want to represent our community, so that we can get hopeful and inspired during midterm elections or presidential elections, whatever year that is. We have to have a consistent level of involvement, and that also motivates somebody else to want to come in and also lend their skill sets to help us create a democracy in which we're proud to live in. Remember, our this is just me. Our time here as humans, like we should spend that in service to each other. Now, I'm not taking credit. There was a particular saying, and I don't want to mess that up. Matter of fact, I might put it in here as we move forward. But we have to understand that we were put with a limited time here, and we're supposed to contribute something significant towards this earth and towards the people that we come in contact with. And so this voting thing, I just hear so much negativity around it. And you're right to an extent, but that's because you're dealing with the options that are given to you. You're not going out there and making options that you can be proud of. Or we're not necessarily sitting with the politicians, not as an individual, but as a community. We need to develop an agenda, develop something that says, hey, here's where we are on economics. Here's where we are on healthcare. Here's where we are on fundraising. Here's where we are on a agenda for what our community looks like. And again, we don't all have to agree on everything, but we can definitely sit down and find something that we can come to the table with. And I'm talking about that something, it starts in your community, but it needs to have tentacles that branch out and impacts communities all around us. I'm fortunate to be here in the capital of the great state of Florida with two universities and one community college where some of the best minds that I'm talking about, faculty and students. I know that we can be a model community to be a Washington, D.C. or an Atlanta 2.0 when it comes to formulating trends and models that other communities across this nation can benefit from, that can draft from, and then we reproduce so that, as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. But nothing is going to change if we sit on the sidelines and we point and we know we're Monday, as they say, Monday morning quarterbacks, or hindsight is always, they shouldn't have did this, they shouldn't have did that. No, what did you do? You know, how did you come to the table? You just want to sit on the sidelines. You cannot sit on the sidelines in life. You was given life. You breathing life for a reason. And so what is that reason? And what does it mean if you're not contributing towards the improvement of yourself, your family, and the people who which you come in contact? So I think it's enough. I understand the pessimism, but you got to get back at the table and go back to the drawing board. Community societies, your favorite TV shows, there were scripts, they worked on this stuff, they tried things out, they pulled it back. If we look at our history, we go through that. You want to talk about that 400 years of slavery, and you want to talk about the Jim Crow afterwards, and you want to talk about the situation that leads up before we get to Barack Obama, and then after. The underlying motif of all of that was that there was perseverance, there was persistence, and there was constant going back and redrafting something until we got it right. But there was not a rebelliousness, but there was a sense of resistance, a sense of resolve that existed in us. We've lost that. I feel like this generation, we've lost that. It's not that we can't get it back. I'm just talking about where we are now. And the criticism is not wrong. The criticism is not bad. You need to accept some of that criticism. And then you figure out, I agree on that part. Here's where I think we could step it up. But disagreeing, I can't tolerate the disagreeing, then you're not offering a viable solution. And then when your solution, somebody disagrees with yours, you just want to take your ball and go home. That's not getting us nowhere. Look at what they're doing. They're trying to roll back DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. They're trying to roll back the voting rights accomplishments that we have. They're rolling back Roe versus Wade. They're just rolling back all of these accomplishments that our predecessors, our ancestors, our forefathers, our foremothers, that they either laid down their lives for, or they spent their time and energy for, spent their hard-earned money for, sacrificed getting the things that they wanted to get, going on trips, securing a bag, thriving in their career. They stopped all that to make sure that we in our generation had social progress so that we wouldn't have to deal with those things that they did. And right now we're about to push ourselves back and go all the way back into those similar situations. If we don't change, if we don't turn this bus around, that's where we're going to end up. And I don't think that we should be dependent on government. Do I think that the government owes us for some of the atrocities and things that they committed in the past? Hell yeah. However, I don't think we should just be sitting up there like, hey, I'm waiting. No, we need to do for ourselves. And I think that's why it's important to take those percentages and recognize that. Are they wrong? Did they do us wrong? Do they owe us this? Yeah, 50% of the problem is that. But the other 50% is everything that we're not doing. And for me personally, I want to focus on that other 50% of everything that we're not doing. And then we can get that other 50% as they drag their feet and come along. That's why, because right now, all we're doing is sitting and just waiting, and that's not helping. So bringing back the values, standards, incorporating new customs. I was talking to somebody about traditions. It's funny because we have these organizations and these entities that have these traditions. And then people will say, well, you know, that's not the tradition. That's not what we always done. But yeah, the tradition had to start off new. It was new at some point. So then they'll knock somebody else because they're trying to create their own new traditions so that other people can follow afterwards. Generations come along, so things that can be retweaked and reworked. And so you can add on and then you do away with what's not necessary at the time. But now it should never be about rollback. It should always be about improvement. And so I was sitting there and I was wondering, I'm like, oh, let me push my time forward. I was sitting there and I was wondering, you know, we had all these advancements that we love to talk about. Like I was mentioning in the onset of this video, we were talking about the Civil Rights Act, we were talking about the Voting Rights Act, talking about Brown versus Board, desegregation, even though our schools are just as segregated today as they were before that law was passed back in the 50s. And it probably, I would say, even more in more terrible conditions than they are now because of the lack of funding that our schools get, but also just the lack of control that we have in the community over the curriculum and over that space in which our schools exist. That's a very important conversation, dialogue, and dynamic that we need to have. But I said, you know, people always talk about freedom and say, well, y'all been free since 1865. Slavery happened, well, 150 years ago. Why don't y'all get over it? Why don't y'all da-da-da? And I said, you know, wait a minute. I was reading something and it said, well, sure, that mode and method of slavery, being on the plantations, ended maybe 1865. Then you had sharecropping that happens afterwards, which is Slavery by Another Name, a great book by Douglas Blackman. I recommend that book too. But then you had Jim Crow. Jim Crow happens, let's just say, all the way up until 1965. So now let's say the freedom started from there, 1965 onwards. Well, I know one thing that we can agree on. We've been free for a lot less time than we were enslaved. So you have about 400 years between slavery and Jim Crow. And then now you got about 58 years, give or take. And you expect 58 years of finally getting those foots off our necks, finally getting access and the ability to go where we want to go. But then all of a sudden, we're supposed to just erase the 400 years of indoctrination, subjugation, depression, the split of the family, all those different dynamics and things that occurred. How does that even make sense? How does the time even add up? But I want to step further. And what I said, well, if I'm in the United States of America, this is a capitalist society. This is one of the great thriving societies in the world. But capitalism, you win a game of capitalism through economics, not just through social freedoms where I can go to your store now. So I said, well, if I look around and I know that my community is right now overtly dependent on jobs, overly dependent on other entities hiring me and paying me a livable wage, right? Even trying to get to a livable wage. But we know businesses are going to pay as little as they can so that they can yield the largest profit. Well, if my community is suffering from high rates of poverty and this country is built off capitalism, which is built off economics, then that means that am I still really in some state of subjugation because I'm hindered by advancements because I can't get out of poverty? So now that begs the question of, am I really free if freedom is tied to economics? So, you know, and you know, we always talk about the poor, and or we want to say, oh, they're just dependent, they want the handouts, they're just dependent on the government giving them those food stamps, or they're giving them that money, that unemployment, this and that. Well, the middle class, we talk about this all, I heard President Biden talk about this all the time. The middle class is actually 1 or 2 paychecks away from being in the same place as the people that's in poverty. So then what is the safety net that actually exists for those in the middle class? So it seems like we have a mirage of freedom. We have illusions of freedom. Because now it just depends on what are you measuring? What is your benchmark for freedom? Because if you talk about social, my ability to go anywhere, my ability to try and pursuit of happiness, maybe. Life and liberty is taken from us all the time. through prejudice. So it seems like we might actually have mirages of freedom, and we're not really experiencing the true freedoms that we have, because we're not, it's harder for us to get those business loans to start up a business. We don't have those Fortune 500 companies. We're not at the forefront of the tables, and then being able to hire the board and who sits on the board. We have tokenism. We got a little bit of, representation. Look at what's going on with Silicon Valley. We know the next leg of access is going to be through technological advancements, but where are our people at when you talk about getting into those jobs for STEM? Where are our institutions of higher learning? I went and I had a conversation with some kids the other day on campus, and I was saying, I admire and love our HBCUs, but the one critique that I have is that we stop building institutions of higher learning. We should have Black colleges that have been constructed in the 1990s and early 2000s. Why did we stop building centers and facilities that accommodate and that recognize our special conditions and special situations? We shouldn't have to need permission for that. There should be strategies as to where we're still building these institutions that matter to us, that are important for us. And the beautiful thing about these institutions like HBCUs or anything that we did is we never tried to keep out anybody. We never built our institutions to discriminate or to create barriers for anybody else. And so that's what inclusivity looks like. And when you talk about the resilience that our people have for this nation, the patriotism that our people have for this nation to go through what we have went through and to still have a sense of love, patriotism, celebrate that flag on July 4th, or, to still live in this country, work in this country, that says a lot about our true level of commitment towards this country and our love of this country, even for a political party system that takes advantage of us, but we still show up for that party system. And then we have another party system that can be argued to really not care about us, but you still have people that are a part of that as well, that's still trying to figure out how to thrive and survive. And then for even those who may not be a part of it, but yet they still represent themselves as Americans, so many different facets and fashions, I think that speaks volumes to our level of commitment. So our commitment is not in question. We have some systems and some barriers and things that exist. And sure, I would not push that fault off on anybody else 100%. I would definitely say part of that fault is things that we are doing, things that we are not doing. But I think some of us fell asleep at the wheel. But I think, you just need that boost. You need that rejuvenation. You need somebody to come and say, hey, man, wake up. Hey, we need your energy. We need your time. We need your commitment. Come on, let's go. And then get people back in the game. And I think that happens for everybody. So I won't turn my nose up. I won't look down at anything. But what I'm going to say is, once we identify the problems, for every problem, there's a solution. And we need to be solution oriented. And to point the finger and just, oh, this, and that, that's not, how is that conducive to our improvement, our betterment? So, that, again, y'all sitting here with the Talk with Me, it's late night vibes, man. That's just a little bit of stuff that's on my mind, stuff that I came across. We're going to definitely keep this conversation going because, like I said, in order for us to really understand that, and let me say this, for my friends who are part of other backgrounds, I applaud, what you all have done in this community. I applaud your ability to come here to keep your cultures intact to an extent, to to be the keepers of that flame, right? To make sure that that torch still burns for the next generation. There needs to be an understanding, and I can't blame you right? Because we go through the same school system that doesn't talk about this, but the Immigration and Nationality Act, do you know what year do you know what year that last one happened in? That real important one, do you know what year that was? And what was going on in this country? And then that opened up the floodgates to allow more minorities to come in, that stopped the quota system. Do you know what was going on in this climate at that time before a lot of your family members can even come here? That was the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 during the Civil Rights Movement, where our ancestors' bodies was on the line. And it upended the racist immigration quota system intended to keep this nation so-called pure, to only allow people to come in from certain European nations. That work that those were doing during the Malcolm X, the Black Panther Party, during all those times, that was also for your benefit as well. So again, remember, I'm telling you, we need this. I'm trying to stop these instances of division and try to figure out how we can unify and come together. But there should be no place for prejudice against other minority groups. It's important for all of us to work together. So now if this don't apply, as they say, if this don't apply, let it fly. But for those who may not know that history, who may not understand that recognition, because, you know, like we said, the history, some people are in control of what gets disseminated and what gets out. Now, you're always in control of what you get access to because you can go and do the individual work to learn more. You can watch YouTube channels like this. You can crack open books, go to libraries, do whatever. But that Immigration and Nationality Act that most immigrants benefit off of today is from 1965. And I know that our people have been at the forefront of conversations to make sure that the dreamers are protected, that people are able to get across those borders, you know, and to get an education here in this community. But I know some people in those same communities are the ones who discriminate against our people as well, and who don't show up for us. You did in the George Floyd. That's some of the first times. That's one of the first and a few times. And it's appreciated. But we've always showed up. So it's always just in peace and love. I appreciate y'all for rocking with another episode of House of I-10. We're going to keep building on the economic talk because that's where Martin Luther King, that's where they was pivoting towards. And as people here today, it is our responsibility to pick up the baton from where they left off, not to just look back there and see where they stopped, and then for us not to do anything to help move that plan forward and build on that plan. So again, you're rocking with House of I-10. I value you. I appreciate you. Join us again for another deep conversation. You know, hey, much love.